Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this virtual policy forum of the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. Today, we'll spend about an hour discussing the Middle East's perilous moment, policy implications, and escalation risks following the unprecedented state-on-state attack by Iran against Israel over this weekend on April 13th. I'm Dana Stroll. I'm the research director here at the Washington Institute and also the Shelley and Michael Casson Senior Fellow. I'm joined here in Washington by Farzeen Nadimi, a senior fellow with the Institute and well-known Iran expert, co-creator of our interactive Middle East maritime attack tracker, and author of our 2023 study, The Next Generation of Iranian Ballistic Missiles. Quite an important topic today. We are also joined from Israel by Zohar Palti, the Washington Institute's Viterbi International Fellow and former head of the Israeli Defense Ministry's Policy and Political Military Bureau. Let me share with you how we'll proceed during this webinar today. I'll share a few opening remarks, then turn it over to Farzeen, and then we'll head out to Israel to Zohar for his opening remarks. I'll then ask each of the panelists a few prepared questions, and then we'll open it up to audience and participant questions. If you would like to ask questions of myself, Farzeen, or Zohar today, please enter them in the Zoom Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. If you are watching this policy forum on our website or YouTube, feel free to email your questions to policyforum@washingtoninstitute.org. Again, policyforum@washingtoninstitute.org. With those rules of the road, let me kick off our webinar today by sharing some framing thoughts about where we are in the Middle East today. Let me start by sharing a few reflections on President Biden and his priorities for the Middle East at this point in time. Very clearly, after October 7th, President Biden set out several objectives for his national security team and how it should approach the Middle East. The first one is to support the defense of Israel and Israel's right to defend itself in Gaza from the horrific October 7th Hamas terrorist attack. President Biden's second objective was to prevent regional war. This overarching policy objective has not changed. There are several different actions that the administration here in Washington has taken to support both the defense of Israel and also to prevent full-scale conventional conflict across the region. The first is an increase in defense posture since October 7th, including an increase in U.S. naval and maritime presence, air defense, and forces on the ground. President Biden again authorized another increase in U.S. military posture in the Middle East in the recent weeks after Iran made clear it was going to respond to the strike in Damascus that killed IRGC personnel. Secondly, the Biden administration has set out on a coordinated campaign of public and private messaging that has happened for the past 6 months, and it's been very clear. The first is Israel has a right to defend itself, especially when the leaders of Hamas hold hostages to this day and have threatened to perpetrate additional October 7th attacks again and again and again. And the private messaging has been that although we are going to continue to support Israel's defense, the United States does not seek full-scale conventional conflict. Through both defense postures, other demonstrations of military force, and again, this consistent use of diplomacy and strategic messaging, the United States has made it clear that it wants Israel to have the space to complete its military campaign to dismantle Hamas in Gaza while prioritizing the humanitarian situation and minimizing collateral damage. But still, the United States remains strategically aligned with Israel in its goal to dismantle Hamas. Finally, President Biden has authorized selective use of force unilaterally by the United States military in Iraq and Syria in response to the well over 180 attacks by Iran-backed militia groups against U.S. forces in the region. And President Biden has also authorized U.S. military force multilaterally, specifically with a coalition targeting the Houthis in Yemen, who have sought to wrap themselves in a mantle of defending the Palestinians in Gaza, but are threatening freedom of navigation and the free flow of commerce in one of the world's most strategic and critical choke points. A few words on Iran's approach in the Middle East. Iran's overarching objective for a very long time, well before October 7th, was to expel U.S. forces from the region to pave the way for it to be the regional hegemon. Since October 7th, we have seen Iran attempt to impose costs on U.S. forces for its support for Israel, drive a wedge between the United States and Israel, and position itself as the defender of Palestinian civilians. It sought to accomplish this through proxies in Lebanon, in Yemen, Iraq, and Syria, etc., after October 7th and before April 13th. But now we've seen that it is seeking to do this directly with a state-on-state attack, as we saw this weekend. Taking stock of where Iran is today, it has failed to achieve any of its goals. The U.S. military is not only still present in the Middle East, but it has increased its posture. The Middle East has not had a U.S. aircraft carrier in the region since the Afghanistan evacuation in 2021, and last year we had 2. There are more destroyers, more forces, more air defense, and more fighter aircraft in the air above the region now than before October 7th. Iran's own deterrence is in question with the abysmal failure of its complex attack over the weekend. And it misread the tea leaves about the U.S.-Israel partnership. Even though the Biden administration has made it clear that it is frustrated by aspects of Israel's response in Gaza, it misread that the strategic alignment has been there the entire time. The United States is going to stand up in defense of Israel when it is at risk of an Iranian attack. Once again, Iran finds itself isolated on the world stage, and all of the public messaging right now is about Iranian aggression, not about Israeli aggression. A new chapter in the narrative has unfolded. I'd like to share a few thoughts on the United States as the security integrator in the region. What we saw on April 13th is U.S. allies and partners from Europe and the Middle East working with the United States and also with Israel to defend the sovereign airspace of the region from Iranian aggression. This is what it means to have a strategic partnership with the United States. And this doesn't happen overnight. The work of Integrated Air and Missile Defense, or IAMD, has been a years-long endeavor of the United States with its partners across the region. And that work had been accelerating well before October 7th, based on several different developments. The first, of course, is the game-changing entrance of Israel into the U.S. Central Command area of responsibility, moving from the European Command. Number 2 is, despite political and diplomatic decisions of various governments in the region, the military, security, and intelligence establishments of both Arab partners and Israel is quite clear that Iran is the center of gravity for instability, the export of terrorism, and of course, its illicit nuclear weapons program. And finally, technology advances make integrating early warning and air defense capabilities more cost-effective and faster than they have been at any other period in time. Given the convergence of those 3 trends, U.S. CENTCOM has been leading for years work to integrate and stitch together the air defense capabilities of its partners, and we just saw proof of concept of that over the weekend. The question is where we go from here. I think it's quite clear that if it's about the air defense, sovereign airspace of our partners, there's room to work together. But if we try to push this into an anti-Iran, pro-Israel coalition, our partners will be nervous. Where do we go from here? President Biden has made it clear to his Israeli friends that Israel has the high ground after the weekend. He wants Israel to take the win. Consistent with Biden's approach globally from the very beginning of his presidency, he prefers diplomacy first, and military force is a last tool. We've seen a flurry of diplomatic activity since Iran's attack over the weekend. President Biden convened the leaders of the G7. There was an emergency UN Security Council meeting. And just today, we see reports that the Treasury Department is prepared to issue new sanctions against Iran. This escalation cycle might have been closed, except Iran communicated that it seeks to unilaterally change the rules of the game. It said over the weekend, if Israel targets Iranian personnel, specifically IRGC personnel, a US designated foreign terrorist organization, anywhere in the region, Iran will respond with another state-on-state complex attack. The ball is now in Israel's court for what happens next. And here, of course, Israeli leaders have choices and agency in the timeline and range of options they might consider in calibrating their response. How does Israel keep the partners in the region on side that we just saw work together multilaterally to defend the airspace from Iranian aggression? How do we not squander this moment? Even for the past 6 months, Israel's peace treaties with Jordan and Egypt have held. Its agreements with the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain through the Abraham Accords countries have held. We know that military cooperation with Israel and the United States has continued despite the frustration at the United States for its support for Israel and frustration with Israel's campaign in Gaza. Are there non-kinetic options Israel might consider? What is the timeline for Israel's potential response? But it's also quite clear for many here in Washington, and we'll hear from Zohar in Israel, that for the Iranians to believe that they can unilaterally move the strategic goalposts of this war, of this conflict, is unacceptable. So what is that sweet spot of a policy response that can make it clear that the adversary does not get to unilaterally change and impose the rules of the game? One final remark. The complex attack of drones, cruise missiles, and ballistic missiles that we saw attack Israel over the weekend is not the first time we've seen such an attack. We see them consistently from Russia targeting Ukrainian civilians and civilian infrastructure. If there wasn't a moment to shine light on the Iranian provision of lethal equipment to Russia and the exchange of lessons learned and best practices between these two adversaries, now is the time for the United States, for Israel, for its partners in the Middle East, and our partners in Europe to be working together to confront this axis of aggression. Thank you, and I turn it over to Farzin.
Thank you, Dana. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. 13 days after the strike that destroyed an Iranian building in downtown Damascus with several high-ranking Quds Force commanders in it, the Vilayat al-Faqih and IRGC finally made the arguably difficult decision of going ahead and hit Israel directly from Iran with a combined drone and missile strike. Strategically, it was designed to be bold, to break a taboo of hitting Israel from Iran itself, to undermine Israel's QME, the qualitative military edge, and to set a new paradigm that any attack directed at Iranian officials and facilities anywhere might and will bring a similar response inside Israel. They also wanted to undermine the Israeli state versus its Arab and Palestinian population. Operationally, despite a relatively large number of drones and missiles involved, Iranians also tried to limit their scope and focused on those military facilities that were perceived to have been directly involved in the original Damascus strike. Drones and cruise missiles largely played a secondary role, while it was the crown jewel of Iran's offensive power, the ballistic missiles, that played the key part. They fired over 100 of them from missile bases across Iran to penetrate Israeli missile defenses and affect their intended targets. Looks like a few of them managed to do that. Tactically, it wasn't designed to offer much of a tactical surprise. It was designed to achieve the effect in spite of that. They wanted to test the Israeli defenses against their ballistic missile technology. They stepped into uncharted territory with the hope to overwhelm defenses and to learn as much as possible from the experience. But the Iranian regime is also very concerned about the potential Israeli response and the risk of escalation. They remain on high alert. Iran might start to reduce its reliance on its proxies as a result of this experience and increase investment on it in its own missile programs, including on supersonic cruise missiles, probably seeking more Russian help while doing that. It's prudent that besides projecting a credible military threat against Iran, the United States and its allies in the region, including Israel, must fast track toward a regional defensive alliance with a robust air and missile defense network. The keywords here are coalition, alliance, and partnerships. Just as they are China's weak spots in the Indo-Pacific, they are going to be Iran's too in the Middle East. Thank you very much.
Hi, Zohar. Over to you in Israel for your opening remarks. I think you're muted, my friend.
Sorry about it. Okay. Great to be with you. And I'll try to give you the Israeli perspective for the time being, although, you know, it's an ongoing process and we will see. We see it as a historic and a strategic event with deep implications on our national security. It's the first time that a third circle country like Iran attacked directly and military in a way that we haven't seen in the past from Iran's soil, not by proxy, with hundreds of what we call air breather, that's mean UAV drones, attack one, cruise missiles, and ballistic missiles. Somebody that is using more than 300 ballistic missiles is not testing nothing. He wants to kill Israeli as much as he can. And the question, why right now, it seems to me that there is a lot of debate regarding this issue, but no doubt that the supreme leader himself, Mr. Khamenei, decided personally to attack Israel right now. I believe he believed that there is a slippery slope over here regarding his internal issues. This is one. Secondly, I think that there was a miscalculation by the Iranians regarding some of the bump that they saw between us and our great friend Americans, and I'll speak about it in a minute. But in a way, it's something that maybe give us a glimpse. In a minute, I will speak about what the Iranians will do. God forbid if one day they will have a military nuclear bomb. There was a debate whether the Iranians afraid, intimidate, deterrent from Israel, but there was no doubt that from America, they have deterrence. I want to remind that President Biden just last Friday said the word don't. Even then, the Iranians decided to attack with all the capabilities that they have, and this is something significant. I think over here that the Iranians haven't or didn't understood till the end the deep relationship that the United States and America has. It's important to have outstanding connection between leaders, but it's much more important to have the shared values. And it's much more important to have two democracies, two nations, that our religion is the freedom of speech and democracy. And it's a show that all the extreme, outstanding defense relations that we used to have with America in the last 3-4 decades, we saw it 2 days ago. Unbelievable work of what the American and the Israeli have done together. The defense and the Israeli and the Americans' technology, and the fact that the Congress invests billions of dollars in R&D in defense systems just save so many lives, mainly in Israel right now, but I can say both of the sides. The Arrow 2, the Arrow 2, and the Arrow 3 that one day will be, I hope that we are all going to test them with the David Sling, with the Iron Dome systems, have done remarkably based on the fact that there have been so many dozens of jets in the air with the coalition, first of all, we saw that we have friends, and this is something great. We always used to hear Dana is over here, and I know Dana and respect her for many years for her service for the United States of America. Always when the American used to speak about how important is a coalition and friends and to coordinate with partners, frankly, Israel always think about them. We think about how to defend ourselves alone. It was the first event that we saw that we have outstanding friends, also the French and also the Brits and some other partners over here in the Middle East. It seems to me that the Abraham Accords and the fact that we are part of CENTCOM, we just saw the outcome, sadly, that it is so complex, but no doubt we saw the fruits of the Abraham Accords and the fact that we enhance our tight operational cooperation with CENTCOM. What CENTCOM have done here, leading by General Kurila and Admiral Cooper over here, was amazing. And we are so grateful about that. Other thing that we saw is the resilience. Again, we saw it, the resilience of the Israeli civil society. It's not only suicide attacks in the Second Intifada. It's not only 1991 when we got scuds from the Iraqis. It's not the last half year. The Israelis are resilience. Day after, everybody went to work. Israel is functioning and everything is okay. I think that the most important here to understand that the night between the 13th and the 14th was a milestone, and that's what the Israeli always said to the Americans and the international community. First of all, it's not only our problem, it's international problem. This is one. Secondly, if somebody used to have doubts regarding if to contain the Iranian ambitions to get one day, God forbid, military nuclear bomb, the Iranian, with the move of 2 days ago, just showed us there are no restraint by the Iranian leadership. If they will have, God forbid, one day nuclear, imagine to yourself that they have to do whatever they've done to us, to any country in the world. And by the way, I want to remind all of us, September 14, 2019, what they've done to the Saudis, what they've done to the Emiratis in 21 and 22. And right now it's Israel, the Iranian aggressive, and they show that they're willing to use whatever capabilities they have. No restraint regarding nothing. That's give us a lot of sense regarding the future. The Israeli and American community, I mean, I have my criticism regarding the October 7 and some other issue, tactical one, but over here, the intelligence community, mainly the Israelis and the Americans, show over here superiority. They knew exactly the Iranian intention, and they gave an early warning to the IDF and to the states of Israel, to the civilians. This is something encouraging to see, and no doubt that the intelligence, this is a strategic tool that we have to preserve. Our Air Force, we haven't seen him in the last half a year because Gaza is a tactical issue. But over here, we saw that the fact that we have outstanding capability the Americans share with us, like the JSF, the F-35, with the defense systems, with the F-16, with the cooperation that we have on the same line, on the same radars with CENTCOM, that was amazing. Our military industry, also big chapeau. The engineers, the investment that they're doing in technology, in R&D, this is the future. Whether it's AI, whether it's satellites, whether it's communication, whether it's advanced weapon systems, guys, the Iranians haven't seen yet our offensive capability. I'm telling you, they are much even better than our defense capability. If we will use them, it will be a shock. I wish that we will use it wisely. America is a strategic partner. We saw it. And over here, my last sentence, I will say something like that. We have 4 or 5 scenes right now, 4 balls in the air. We need a strategy to define what is our first priority. I'm telling you, on the eve of Pesach, the holiday of the freedom, the most important thing is to bring our people home. With all due respect to the Iranians, and I have respect to the Iranians, they can wait. And we should have, and we need, first of all, a strategy. Secondly, to find a way how to free our people and to bring them home. It won't be to Pesach, sadly, but maybe after Pesach, and then we will deal with the Iranians. We have an open account with the Iranians. I wish that we are not going to do something tiny, that we will say just on the sake that we retaliate or something like that, and then the international community will say, hey, guys, you've done whatever you've done, let's close this account. No, I want to leave it open, and if I'm doing something big, to do it something big. And by meaning big, you know exactly what I mean. And right now, when the Iranian under alert and a bit intimidate, let them to stay like that. Anyway, if we will do something over here and to retaliate, and we will retaliate, and whether it will be today, next week, or a couple of months from now, this is less important, I'm telling you. No country in the world, sovereign country, can take an attack by a second country on a soil with 300 and something without retaliation. It will come. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Zohar. What I'm going to do now is ask you both a few questions, and I'm going to integrate some of the questions that have come from our viewers today. Let me again remind all of those tuning in for this webinar, you are welcome to use the Zoom function at the bottom of your screen, Q&A, to submit those questions. I can see them right now. And also you are welcome, if you're watching this webinar on our website or YouTube, to email your questions to policyforum@washingtoninstitute.org. Again, policyforum@washingtoninstitute.org. So Zohar, you just laid out a case for strategic patience by Israel in terms of how it conceives of responding or retaliating against the April 13th state-on-state attack. But all eyes are on Israel right now, with the meetings in the war cabinet, the decisions that have been placed with Prime Minister Netanyahu, Minister Gantz, and Minister Gallant to take decisions about what the Israeli response might be. We watched the Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Halevi, visit an airbase right after the attack and also talk about the need to respond. So can you talk to us about some of the debates within Israel about the timeline? There could be a response, there could be a non-kinetic lower key response. Also, Israel for years has implemented what has been called a war between the wars. And the intent is to signal to IRGC personnel, we see you, we know what you're doing, we know what you're engaged in, and you're not safe. Why can't Israel just wait? And the next time there are senior IRGC personnel, there might be another explosion in a residential building. Talk to us about the debates within Israel about how to respond, because what the case you just made is different from what we're hearing from Israel. And then I want to add to this question, you said what this weekend strike shows, the weekend attack from Iran, is that this is an international problem, not an Israeli problem. Is there an understanding in Israel about actions that Israel might take that would make the international community less inclined to continue various actions to counter Iranian aggression?
I'm not sure that I have something intelligent to say about the debate you're reading in the paper, first of all, in the Israeli media and also in the international media. Based on my experience, I would say something like that. Let's say that we'll do something relatively tiny, that is not in, I don't know, that there won't be a global war over here in the Middle East just because of it. That Iran will have the ability to contain it or something like that. I think it's a waste of time. And I'm for not big speeches right now by some of our leadership. And I remember carefully that this leadership used to be in October 7. And I have my own doubts. First of all, I want that this leadership will explain me what the strategy right now, how to bring our people before they're going to a war with Iran. And secondly, if we want to do something big in Iran, let's go for the real Jews. All the other ones is not serious. Meaning, I don't want to be very blunt over here and to say whether we'll do this tactical or that. We've done almost everything. There is only one thing, 1.5 things that we haven't done yet. There was debate in the last decade whether to do it or whether not. Each day that I see more 60%, and I see some other concerning development in the nuclear program, I say, guys, this is it. And leave the open account that we have right now with the Iranian for the real juice, not for something tiny that everybody will say, okay, let's close this deal. The other issue, we have a problem with Hezbollah. We have almost 70, 80,000 people right now all over north of Israel in a 10 kilometers radius all over the coastal border. They are not living in their house already half a year. Guys, we're getting to the moment that we'll have to take Hezbollah down completely. And that will be a big blow up to Iran. This is the two options that we have. All the other ones, if we will do something in 5 minutes, not that I'm against it, but I think it will be a waste of a silver bullet over here.
Thanks for that, Zohar. I'm going to offer a few thoughts to both of you and then ask Farzin to respond first, followed by Zohar. First is there is continued debate about the epic failure of Iran's attack over the weekend and questions about whether, given how much signaling and discussing of the response in advance took place, did the Iranians intend for it to fail? We already heard from Zohar his view that there was clear lethal intent. So here's the question. There was a misreading of the intelligence about Hamas's intent before October 7, and a view that through working with Qatar and stabilizing the civilian population in Gaza, Hamas would not choose to launch such a horrific terrorist attack that would completely have serious consequences for the people of Gaza. And a complete misreading that Yahya Sinwar himself would care about the population of Gaza. There has similarly been an assumption that Iran would seek to continue to impose costs and pressure Israel through its proxies and not with a direct state-on-state attack like what we saw this weekend. So here's the question. Why now? What was the trigger for Iran decision makers to choose a complex attack launched from Iranian territory itself toward Israel? How does this change how we should think about Iranian use of force and the kinds of options that we might consider or Israel might consider in the future? And then layered with that, why did this attack fail? Is it that our partner and US and Israeli air defense capabilities are so good? Why did so many of the ballistic missiles fail in launch? And then again, this question, was the Iranian strategic objective actually to have a show of force and fail, or were they intending to cause such damage? Farzin.
Thank you. I don't think any country develops an elaborate military industrial complex just to fail and launch a military operation, very complex military operation against its arch enemy with the intention of failure. They acted to win, and they, as they have acclaimed themselves, they have been doing this under the concept of effects-based operations to achieve their effects with the best possible force and equipment capabilities, and while maintaining an economic number. I mean, achieving the best results with the least needed numbers. In this case, Iran used a combined force of drones, cruise missiles, and ballistic missiles. It doesn't mean that they did not intend their cruise missiles or drones to achieve results or to reach their intended targets. I'm sure they did, especially considering the number of missiles and drones used. But they could have also served a very important role of overwhelming Israeli and allied defenses, and with the intention of allowing the main force of ballistic missiles to have a higher chance of success and achieving reaching their targets. They used quite several different types of ballistic missiles designed to penetrate Israeli missile defenses and reach their targets. They were launched from a number of different missile bases, and they flew different ranges to reach their targets. Why many of them failed during the launch or during the early phases of launch, that corresponds to the low quality of their products, probably the low quality of quality control. And we have seen in previous cases that many Iranian missiles are not as reliable as the Western systems are. They fail on launch, and in many cases, they actually cause harms and death and casualties among their own people living around the bases. But they also wanted to test the efficacy of their offensive missile systems, how they perform against the Israeli and U.S. missile defenses. In this case, many of them were intercepted, including in outside the atmosphere, and that there were several cases of exoatmospheric interceptions very successfully performed either by Israel or by the U.S. Navy, and therefore many of those missiles that were intended to hit targets in Israel never reached there. But in spite of that, a small percentage of those missiles penetrated Israeli defenses and reached their targets, and that's the reason that I believe missile defenses partnership in the region is very important, and we should work on that in the future.
Zohar, over to you.
I think part of it I said already. Why now? I think it was a decision of the Supreme Leader Khamenei right now. You know, I can understand if you took at the past decision United States kill. This is a figure. But the question is more tactical. Why now on a guy like Mahdavi? This is the response. It's so important, like Qasem Soleimani, for example. So I guess because some elements, it was a slippery slope, that he was afraid that if it's coming to that, the next one will come and things like that. This is one. Secondly, I think that he was assessed that maybe Israel alone, and he was under pressure of October 7th. Again, miscalculation over here regarding our intelligence and our Air Force capability. You remember the speech of Nasrallah regarding the spider web, that after 2006, he understood that we are not exactly spider web. Maybe somebody planted his idea that we are spider web. And my most concern, and this is only hypothetical, I have no proof for that for the time being, that maybe they have a wild card in their arsenal, like some development that give them the ability in the nuclear issue, that give them the ability, guys, we are immune. I'm afraid, and I'm trying to right now to think about this option as well, that we're going to wake up in 5 minutes and to find out that those guys feel much more secure because of some development. It's okay to say that we've done good, not because the Iranian didn't mean it. It sounds to me like conspiracy that some people are trying to plant right now the Iranian didn't mean. Seriously, it's like Hamas didn't mean to do October 7th. Over here, the superiority of the American and Israeli technology, this is the answer that we gave to the Iranians. And yes, one JSF in the air, see whole the Middle East is much better than all the other superpower aircraft that there is. And when there is dozens of JSF, American, Brits, French, and Israelis in the air, there is a result. And all of them have done super job. And our Air Force was trained to a scenario like that for years. I spoke with the commander of the Air Force like 2 weeks ago, and he said, Zohar, we are ready. It will be okay. And he was right. He was ready. It was okay. And then the combination in the last 2 years of CENTCOM, Dana, that you know better than me, that the training and the fact that the Houthi launch and the fact that the Shia militias are launching all the time, and the lesson that we learned from September 14, 2019 with the Saudis, and the lesson regarding the Emirates, guys, we're dealing over here with an octopus that all the Middle East, all the region is suffering from him. And you used to bury so many American soldiers because of them in Afghanistan, in Iraq. They're attacking American soldiers all over the Middle East in the last 2 years and 3 years and more than that. You know the figures better than me. Dennis speak about it all the time. Guys, we have a serious people over here in Iran that just failed 2 days ago to achieve what they are because our guys, the good guys, have done a super job. This is it.
Thanks, Zohar. Farzin, this next question is for you. Zohar talked about the octopus, the tentacles of the octopus that reach out across the region, destabilizing it. Reflecting on how successfully Israel, the United States, and many others defended against this attack, downed the drones, intercepted the missiles, etc. If you're the Houthis in Yemen, what are you thinking today? Has Houthi views about Tehran and Iranian capabilities changed? You might have some thoughts on this, given that you so closely track Houthi attacks on international shipping. And the same thing for Hezbollah. Zohar talked about the fact that we are reaching a point where Israel might feel compelled to take care of Hezbollah. There's been a lot of talk about this. We know the administration here is concerned about a military confrontation with Hezbollah, which is why the president's envoy, Amos Hochstein, has worked so hard to pre-negotiate an arrangement that might stabilize the North should there be a hostage release and temporary pause on hostilities in Gaza. But today, what is Hezbollah thinking, looking at how effectively Iran's state-on-state attack was intercepted and defeated? What are the Houthis thinking? What are the Iran-backed militias in Iraq and Syria thinking? And are there opportunities for how our coalition, the one that seeks to defend the sovereignty of our partners, should look at this as an opportunity? Are there any opportunities?
I think Houthis knew from the very beginning, from back in November 19, how effective the anti-missile defenses on board the U.S. Arleigh class destroyers can be, and the coalition of warships, how effective they can intercept their anti-ship ballistic missiles. Well, generally, Houthis were able to affect the minds of the shipping community, the ship owners, operators. But from the military perspective, they were a failure. Many of those anti-ship ballistic missiles failed to reach their targets. And many of those drones and anti-ship missiles were intercepted and destroyed by the warships and fighter aircraft on patrol. And so therefore, this is not news to the Houthis. But they might have expected much more from their Iranian friends, even though they still expect depend financially and technically on Iranians. But from now on, they might feel the need to find their own way of doing business in the region, and Iran might also find its general proxy strategy in the region, and not having the intended effects that they had in mind. Therefore, they might again move to more unilateral measures, move toward their own especially designed niche military technologies and weaponry. And now it may be a time that they more rely on Russia to develop technologies, including satellites and launch vehicles that can have a better intelligence dominance, create and maintain some intelligence capability in orbit. So we might see a move away from a proxy environment that Iran has created in the last few years. But on the other hand, we can see this April 13 operation as a continuum of October 7. Right after the October 7 military the terrorist actions, the supreme leader of Iran called it the end of Israeli deterrence, and he emphasized on the irreparable nature of this probably with this operation, they continue to undermine, they intended to continue the undermining the deterrence of Israel, and from this perspective, and therefore now they maybe rely more on their own capabilities as opposed to their proxies.
Thanks for that, Farzin. So what I'm hearing you say is the risk of the center being exposed as even weaker increases the chances of more independent unilateral decision-making or actions by the proxy network that the Iranians have built up over all of these years, or even independent reaching out to Russia themselves for more support or sophisticated hardware. Zohar, is the view in Israel the same, that a risk of what we saw on April 13th is more unilateral independent actions by the proxies, especially the Houthis or Hezbollah? And does that make it riskier for Israel or actually offer some opportunities?
It's too soon to know yet. First of all, bother me, and I think that Farzin and you emphasize it. I saw the statements of the Russians right after the attack the other couple of days ago. Bothering. And if we will see over here backup more significant from the Russian, this is something that no doubt that the United States will be concerned about it, and of course Israel as well. This is will be the bad development. Although the seeds of that we saw by the Iranian helping and sending attack UAVs to the Russian in Ukraine. So over here, guys, and I remember when the Russian came in September 2015 to Syria, I saw almost every cooperation in the world in Syria through fighting Daesh. That was good, but I saw cooperation already in the past. So this is something that we have to look at it and not to dismiss it. This is something bothering. Regarding if Iran will continue to be more bold right now and to act directly, okay, but there will be consequences to that. And it seems to me that over here also the United States have to do some recalculation, mainly when I see the figures of 1.5 million barrels a day that I saw yesterday from Tehran to another superpower. And it seems to me that the policy, the American policy regarding the sanctions have to change. It seems to me that it would be fair to say and to assess that the JCPOA is not going to be reviled anymore. That means that it's about to consider a different approach to that issue and to enhance its sanctions. If somebody brought the Iranian in 2013 to the table, it was because the Iranian lose between 60 to 80 billion dollars a year from the sanctions of Obama administration between 2010, 11, and 12. That's why they came to Oman. Right now, there is almost no pressure from the international community on Iran, at least not significant enough to change the course of Iran. And based on what we saw a couple of other days, so okay, Israeli retaliation, more big, more small, to leave it to the Israeli, it's fine, it's okay. But the Europeans and the Americans can ignore that we have partners over here in the area, like the Saudis, like the Egyptian, mainly the Jordanians and the Emiratis, guys, we have a problem with Iran. We see what's going on in the Red Sea. We see what's going on right now in the Suez Canal. The Egyptians are losing billions because of what they're doing to them by launching with the Houthis against the maritime shipping in the Red Sea. We have to recalculate some of our strategy, and not necessarily by kinetic means. We have so many other tools in order to deal with that. And if we'll know how to deal it also with kinetic. And I'm telling you, after the attack 3 days ago, it will have to be Israeli response. When, how, and that's a different story.
So, Zohar, you just made a comment that Israeli strategy needs updating. So here I have a question for you. Coalition maintenance is hard. It means that you don't get everything you want up front immediately. It requires compromise, a lot of listening, and taking into account the security needs and concerns of partners. The United States has a lot of experience in coalitions, the Supporting Ukraine coalition, the Defeat ISIS coalition, the coalition it's working to develop in the Indo-PACOM theater. And it's been working on an integrated air and missile defense and a security architecture for the region, which is a kind of coalition. You made the remarks earlier that Israel, for the first time over the weekend, understood the value of partnerships and what it can mean and what it can deliver. Understandably, some of the partners in this emerging coalition will want to know that they will receive the same kind of support and commitment and investments from the United States and from Israel. It also has an inkling of a change in Israel's security doctrine, which from the beginning, from before, was defend itself by itself. So the question is Israel's security doctrine going to change? Are there areas where Israel is willing to adjust its current strategy to address the concerns of the partners in this coalition? For example, there are and continue to be concerns about the manner in which the IDF is prosecuting its campaign in Gaza. Is there any flexibility from the Israeli perspective on that to address the concerns of its coalition partners?
I will start with the easy one, the last one. Because I said it publicly, and you know my opinion, and I said it also in the media from 2 weeks after October 7. Yes, we done some mistakes over here. We need to listen regarding humanitarian issue more. But over here, I have to be fair. The fact that I thought that it was a mistake, 70% of the Israeli public opinion, because of the trauma of October 7, thinking differently than me. And they told the government not to do it. And I know all the things what many people think about our government right now, but the public opinion, because of October 7, said, hey, they don't deserve humanitarian from us after what they done to our children and our women in October 7. So that was a Pavlovic response. We needed to pass it. It's over. You saw the amount of humanitarian support that we are just pushing in the last 2 weeks. It was a hard labor, but right now we're on the right track, meaning it seems to me that we listened in the end. It was hard, but now we're on the right track in that issue. No doubt that our national defense strategy will have to change. I'm not sure that it will happen because after 75, 76 years, it will be a process. I'm not sure that the team that's running right now, Israel, after October 7, have the ability to do it. It will be a process. We'll have to digest what happened last Saturday. Not everybody will agree with what I'm saying right now. And in a way, I can also contradict myself. And I'm going back to September 6, 2007, when Prime Minister of Israel is calling his friend, the President of the United States, and ask the Americans to do, because we've been after the Second Lebanon War, and it was quite traumatic for us. And we found out that the Syrians have a military nuclear reactor, and we asked from you guys to do it. And the president said, you know something, maybe I want to do it, but all my team say not to do it, and we decided not to do it. So over here, Israel is not like other countries that you have, because we are living in a crazy neighborhood. It's a rough neighborhood over here. We are not the Australians or the Brits that they have your back and your history and the same language, and they are not living in a neighborhood like we are living over here. We have 4, 5 scenes right now, active one, that people are trying to hurt the people of Israel. So we'll have to find kind of a model over here that is a different one from what it used to be, but not radical like let's say, the Five Eyes. It will have to be something that match the Israeli DNA, the Middle East DNA, but no doubt it will have to be different. But it's a process. It's not going to happen from today to tomorrow.
Thanks for that. I'm going to now answer a question I received. And then after that, I'm going to turn it over to Farzine and then Zohar for any concluding thoughts or anything you wanted to say that you didn't get to say. And then we will conclude this webinar. The question directed at me was, what would U.S. support and involvement look like if Israel decides to strike back against Iran? So here, I think it's very important to listen to the public messaging and the statements that are coming out of the White House and the Pentagon and the State Department. What the U.S. is signaling is that it stands unequivocally in support of the defense of Israel. And it also continues to emphasize the concern for the protection and safety of U.S. forces deployed across the region. What the United States is not saying is that it's going to support offensive operations at this moment in time. I think there are tensions here for both Israel and the United States. I think there's a shared interest in the leaders in Tehran not being able to unilaterally change the rules of the game in the Middle East. The reality is, and it's well documented across reports, public statements, UN Security Council resolutions, as well as the quite clear selective downgrading of intelligence that many share, including the United States, that Iran funds, arms, equips, and directs terrorists, proxies, and militias across the region. Where these militias operate, there are weak governments, civilians and citizens of these countries suffer. There is corruption. There is illicit transfer of weapons. This isn't just a risk to the security of Israel. It is a risk to the safety of U.S. interests, of U.S. forces, of U.S. personnel, and also of the region. Saudi Arabia knows this. The United Arab Emirates knows this. Iraq knows this. Syrian civilians know this. We have an interest in Iran continuing to feel isolated internationally. I agree with Zohar that there should be costs. We've seen that the Treasury Department is considering additional sanctions now. Iran needs, and Iranian leaders need to feel that they cannot impose their own costs on the region, that they cannot unilaterally move the goalposts, especially when they are the ones that are the originators of the malign and destabilizing activities. At the same time, as we think through the emerging coalition that we saw over the weekend and what the United States has been working on, both with the members of the Gulf Cooperation Council and some of the working groups there, as well as in some of the work we saw and the nascent concept of integration that we saw with Israel over the weekend, is that the region does not want war. The leaders of the region are calling for de-escalation. The leaders of the region are calling for increased humanitarian aid, and Zohar talked about how Israel has increased that in recent weeks. So there are multiple considerations here: how to make it clear that Iran does not get to unilaterally move the goalposts of the game, how to preserve stability in the region and not compromise the work that we're seeing amongst leaders and militaries of the region to work together. At the same time, I should add here, what the Biden administration wants is to get back to the business that it was pursuing before October 7th, which is that Israel's security is strengthened in the long term by integration with its partners. The peace treaties, the Abraham Accords, the expansion of the Abraham Accords, the possibility of normalization with Saudi Arabia, all of this is on the table. The longer these conflicts go on, or if there's a conventional war in the region, these objectives are pushed further away. So the question is, how can Israel, the United States, and the region, and other like-minded allies and partners, particularly in Europe, work through a coordinated strategy here? We know the Iranians are creeping closer to nuclear weapon threshold status. There's obviously concern that given their failure over the weekend, they could take more steps there. Everyone who shares an interest in the current order and in the safety and security of their territory and their citizens has an interest in ensuring that Iran and its network of proxies cannot operate across the region without consequences. So is there a sweet spot here? I think it remains to be determined. If Israel is seen as launching an offensive operation that tips the region into another and more increased escalatory cycle that risks conventional conflict, I think President Biden will be very frustrated. At the same time, a core pillar of the national security strategy of his administration, the national defense strategy, is to ensure the defense of Israel. Last I checked, no one has changed that core pillar of U.S. priorities in the region. And so again, I think we'll continue to see some of the longer term foreign military sales continue to Israel. You'll see CENTCOM work at the right time to get back to an exercise schedule, both with the Israelis and multilaterally across the region. You're going to continue to see when there are opportunities to work to strengthen and expand this multilateral architecture. The motivating factor here is that Iran has shown what it's all about. It was willing to send drones and missiles across the region. They fell on the streets of Jordan and Iraq and Syria. This is not a government that wants to work cooperatively for the benefit, the prosperity, the stability, the security of the region. And that is an opportunity, I think, for Israel, the United States, and the region to work together. Let me pause there, turn it over to Farzin for any closing comments, and then out to Zohar.
Thank you. I take this opportunity to emphasize that when we talk about Iran, we are not talking about the majority of the Iranian people. The majority of Iranian people love the United States, they love Israel, they want to have a peaceful coexistence with all their neighbors in the region. But it is the Velat Faqih regime in Tehran with a small minority that supports them, that continue to pursue their zero-sum game of hegemony objectives in the region, and they have been investing huge amounts of Iranian money in their offensive military capabilities and their nuclear project. This is not the Iranian people want, this is the regime wants. And I also want to quickly say that this all goes back to the April 1st, the strike in Damascus against that building. Was it a diplomatic building or not? That's another question. But according to the supreme leader of the regime in Tehran, they call it a sovereign Iranian territory. Therefore, it's protected under the diplomatic norms, and we reserve the right to respond. Well, according to the Vienna Convention of Diplomatic Relations in 1961, diplomatic compounds and grounds are not sovereign territories of the countries that use them. They enjoy certain but at the same time, they are not part of the sovereign territory of that country. And it's very, very interesting that we hear that from the supreme leader, from the regime that in November 1979 seized the U.S. embassy in Tehran and took the U.S. hostages for 444 days, U.S. diplomats. Thank you.
Zohar, bring us home.
Sadly, based on what Farzin said right now, sadly, the public opinion in Iran is under depression of their Basij and their Revolutionary Guard. They are not the one that calling the shots. We respect tremendously the people of Iran, and we have nothing with them. The problem is that we are listening to the leadership in Iran, and they want to eliminate the States of Israel. We built this country under the slogan, never again. There was in our history a couple that tried to destroy us, and that's over here I'm coming to the Americans. What you said, Dana. From my experience, United States very much respect our sovereignty to take our own decision how to protect our family. And as long as we have the United States of America side by side with us, I'm confident that the Americans will be shoulder to shoulder with us, exactly like they've been outstandingly in the last week. I think that the biggest win for the outcome of October 7 and April 14 will be an agreement, peace agreement between us and the Saudis. That will be the best answer to the Iranian aggression and to all the bad guys over here in the region, that the region is continue to accept Israel in the region, and Israel is with them. And the last thing, country like Iran, they try to blow up the Israeli embassy in Baku, twice in Argentina, your barracks in Beirut, the Khobar Towers, Thailand, India, Georgia. I suggest not to preach us and accept country that used to be launching ballistic missiles against Jerusalem. And you saw how the Iron Dome intercept above Haram al-Sharif, meaning the Temple Mount. This is a really, really dangerous currency. That's why the Americans respect it and they will be with us, and we appreciate and grateful for that.
Thank you so much. That concludes today's webinar. Hopefully everyone benefited and learned a lot from the exceptional expertise here at the Washington Institute. If you haven't already signed up, I encourage you to visit our website. Sign up to receive our policy alerts, our policy watches. Follow us on Twitter, follow us on Instagram, and see our video explainers. And of course, get alerts so you can participate in more of these webinars. Thanks everyone for joining us today. Thank you to Zohar for making time for us from Israel. And thanks again to Farzin for sharing your expertise. Signing off.